Ambassador Sinha, I want to bring you in. The videos and the images out of these Gulf countries are really, truly shocking. We have Colonel Itamar saying it's a big mistake. But if you look at some of these videos, you have an oil tanker off the coast of Oman. This is the first ever attack by Iran on any sort of target in Oman. So that tells you what a different situation we're in. We have Fairmont Hotel in Dubai, which we all saw last night. There are images of a luxury hotel, the Crown Plaza in Manama in Bahrain. There is the airport in Dubai, sections of it had to be evacuated, the airport in Kuwait. So this is really a fire that is spreading across these Gulf countries. Now, given your experience, you've met with Khamenei twice, you were in charge of the Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iran desk for 4 years in the government. You have served in 3 of these cities in this area. I want you to bring all that experience and tell us what is happening and what you think might happen next.
Barkha, thank you for having me on your show. 3 quick points initially. First, the decapitation strikes were very effective. They have taken out the top rung, most of the top rung of the Iranian leadership. However, they have not completely decapitated the leadership. They had planned for an eventuality, and the reports, I'm not sure they're confirmed, that Ayatollah Ali Khamenei has been declared as the interim supreme leader. Now, obviously, there's a 3-member council that chooses the leader. I'm not sure whether this council had chosen Ayatollah Khamenei or whether it's a confirmed report or not. But the fact of the matter is that you cannot eliminate completely the regime through aerial bombings. You can decapitate the leadership, but to throw them lock, stock, and barrel, you would need to do much more. Number one. Number two, I agree with Colonel Itmar that the damage that has been caused till now, at least, and I can speak for UAE only because I'm in touch with people from Dubai and Abu Dhabi, has been minimal. In fact, the UAE, I know, has a very layered defense, and they are able, in fact, most of the incoming projectiles, whether they're drones or missiles, have been shot. And the debris sometimes that falls causes panic. Naturally, it would in civilian areas. And Iran obviously doesn't have the sort of precision-guided missiles and drones that Israel and the US have. So they are hitting indiscriminately. You mentioned Oman. Now, Oman has been a friendly country with Iran. They have brokered peace talks, not only now, but in the past also. I recall dealing with Oman when we were trying to buy Iranian oil also. So it's very surprising that the Iranian, whatever is left of their leadership, is flaying out like that. Third point actually. The third point is you see what is happening in Pakistan. You mentioned the attack on the US consulate and 10 people being shot or killed by the US Marines. Obviously, if there is security, how did that happen? It's at peace with what Pakistan does, their duplicity. They run with the hare and hunt with the hound. So while they would let rioters loose and not bother too much about protecting important targets, and yet they will pretend to be the best friends. The so-called field marshal is the favorite field marshal of the White House. So, I mean, the duplicity is stark. So, I mean, because I've served in Islamabad also, so I know how the thing works. And I think time will tell how far this war will go, because if it's not resolved in a week, if there isn't a complete regime change in a week, and I don't think that is going to be possible, at least not with aerial attacks alone, I don't think you're going to have a complete regime change. You will have remnants of the, Basij, the IRGC, etc., taking control, which could be very dangerous, because then you would have splintering of command. And, when you have targets being selected indiscriminately and whatever firepower you have left, you hit. So then there can be collateral damage. So you have to be very careful there.
So, you've put in a lot there, and I'll come to Pakistan maybe just a little separately, because I'll start by talking about whether a regime change, and you've said the regime change doesn't come in a week. As a military man, we have 2 military men here, one from Israel, one from India. Let me come to General Sharma. Can you change governments from the skies? I understand that the nature of warfare has changed. When I look at the missiles and drones coming into the Gulf countries. It reminds me very much of what we went through in Operation Sindoor, but we went through it for 4 days, and then the conflict was halted. The reason I ask this is I agree with both Colonel Itamar and Ambassador Sinha that the damage is not major, but we have to remember that Israel is used to, Colonel Yar didn't even flinch when the air raid sirens were going behind him. They're that used to it. We in India are battle hardened. We have seen years and decades of terrorism. Dubai, Abu Dhabi, the closest they come to war is to see a movie in a cinema hall. They're not used to this. They really are not used to this. So that's psychological panic. The aim to close down airports, close down aviation. Obviously, the goal is maybe the Americans will step back. Do you believe regime change is possible without boots on the ground, General Sharma?
Thank you, Barkha, for inviting me. I think first outset I should say that nobody should get used to wars. It's not a good idea to get used to wars and get battle hardened. But that apart.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah. So I also, taking cue from Ambassador Sinha, will make 3 points. One, obviously the Israeli air defense is very good, superb, as Colonel Yar was saying, and it is not easy to pierce through by the missiles being used. In June last year, the Iranians did manage to get 1 or 2 targets in Haifa, in Tel Aviv, but it is not very simple to do so. And Iran will also understand that it is a weaker regime. It doesn't have the power to contest Americans and Israelis together. No other nations in the world also cannot contest the firepower of Americans and of Israelis together. So they are so potent. They are decades ahead of any other power. So what would a country which has been hands tied to the back would do? They would take on the easier targets which are possible to be done, where it is possible to hit and get some success, to get the weaknesses of the adversaries and not on the strengths. The strength of the adversaries is hitting at the American fleet or Israel, which they know that their missiles will not be able to pierce through. So it is easier to hit areas where there is insufficient air defense cover of this kind. Saudis have a THAAD, Saudis have a Patriot batteries, but this doesn't exist at that level with the Gulf countries. That's why they tried yesterday. At least it was all the air bases and the ports and the logistic bases of the Americans in the Gulf. Today they have expanded it across to civilian areas, or yesterday night they expanded it. These are weaker targets in comparison to hitting Israel or the Gulf assets of the Americans, and therefore they are reaping some kind of success in this game. That's a major point as to how asymmetric warfare is fought, where weaker countries have to find stronger nation. They look at weakest spots to be hit, and that is what Iran is attempting to do, and not wanting to hit Israel. That's and this is how Taliban did against the United States, or the Vietnam did against the United States.
But sir, it worked. It worked.
So it happens. The thing is that it happens. This is the way weaker nations plan to fight asymmetric wars. That's one point. Second is, like, one could say that in Yugoslavia and Kosovo air campaign, there was possible the governments changed at that time. But if we read into Iran, of course, Kanyar and Israelis are the most knowledgeable on the score. I personally, in my readings, had come across that the establishment in Iran had created very many layers of governance, right from provinces and districts up to the top. They had a systemic established across there. That systemic stated that if the Ayatollah had lost his right hand in a blast in 80s, Ayatollah, who now no more, had a prostate cancer in about 10 years ago. So he was already suffering. He's 87 years old. How long could he have survived? Would he have not given a thought of his what happens in the regime changes? He was not going. He's a cancer survivor. He wouldn't have lived for too long. My good guess is that the 3-man team which was made in the morning to select a next gentleman, and then now, of course, they're talking about Arafi, their thought has been given. So 5 and 6 names were already out in the open. The point here is that regime implies what? The supreme leader has to be a cleric. He has to be a religious head. He also has to be an administrator, a Republican fellow, somebody who's experienced in governance. These two things have to match together. That doesn't come across to the grandchildren of the Khamenei, the previous gentleman, or his own. So they would find a methodology to achieve it. Uh, one of the names was the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, which is also a kind of Ayatollah. He leads the prayers in Qom. He also takes on governance issues. He was national security. So the second tier has already been pre-decided, I would say. This three-man team, either Arafi becomes permanent subsequently, or one of the other five, the names which are around, would be one selected who will take it on, and he becomes the supreme commander. Whether he'll be a moderate fellow or he'll be as hardliner as the present government, you can't tell, because that's a futuristic thing. I have a third point, and I'll finish here. Any war which is started yesterday morning starts with the Americans having said, President Trump having said 100 times, I hate long wars. He's been saying this in campaign. He's been saying it in times of Afghanistan. He's been saying it subsequently last 1 year. So there has to be a kind of thought process given to what's the end state. When do they want to say, okay, the war would succeed? How long can you deny Hormuz being closed? How long can you deny the oil exporting countries which depend so much on oil not exporting, or Chinese and all? So there is an issue here, and what is the end state? And my last bit, Barkha, I get a feeling, you mentioned Op Sindoor, so my hackles were raised. I get a feel now that the Chinese, which have done exercises last week, Chinese Navy did exercises with the Iranian Navy last week in the Gulf here. So what have they done? I think many of these drones being sent across there are supported by Chinese satellite system, Beidou. So they are not jammable by the Americans and by anybody else. Because similarly, the Pakistanis also did the same. Only in the last 15, 20 kilometers that the Beidou switches off, and then it goes and hits the target on its own guidance. So the guidance is poor. But actually, these drones, which are just say $20,000 drones, are now a potent force which the Iranians have unveiled, which are not jammable, and they can only be downed by firing a $2 million missile. There is a disparity here coming up into what the Americans will throw against the Gulf states and what the Iran is throwing and what technology they are using.